Hi, my name is Jeff Dixon, and we're continuing our deep dive down that rabbit hole of the life and death and life, perhaps, of Elvis Presley. This is the Elvis conspiracy, and we're wrestling through in the last few episodes, and we'll wrap it up in this one, whether or not Elvis Presley was an undercover agent for the DEA. And so we're going to talk about his role as an undercover agent, and we'll kind of do it under the guise of, is it possible, could he have been an undercover agent? Now, you have to go back and listen to the last two episodes if you're going to kind of keep up with this conversation, because we're going to jump in with some new stuff here. Edmund Burke once said, the only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing. And at the end of the day, you begin asking yourselves, is it possible that perhaps the most visible rock and roll singer of his era, or one of the most well-known entertainers of all time, is it possible that that person could be a government agent? Well, interestingly enough, you might be not surprised to find out that the FBI did in fact and has a file on the life of Elvis Presley. If you were to request that file, there are over 663 FBI documents and data about the life and death of Elvis Presley. There are a number of those that have to do with threats against Mr. Presley's life over the course of his career. There also are a lot of documents that indicate that the threats were not just merely passing threats, but extremely serious threats that the FBI got involved in and took seriously. There's been extensive research on that. Believe it or not, in the Freedom of Information Act, you can actually request those documents from the Department of Justice, and the government charges copying fees on that, but would provide them for you. Right now, the going rate is somewhere between $60 and $80 if you would actually like to get the copies that are available of the Elvis Presley files through the Freedom of Information Act from the FBI. Prior to Elvis's death, we know that he had met with Richard Nixon when Nixon was president, but you may not be aware that he also had a close relationship with President Jimmy Carter. He had met Jimmy Carter before Carter was elected to the presidency. Elvis actually spoke to Jimmy Carter less than 2 weeks before his death on August 16th of 1977. His wish to converse privately with President Carter was delivered to President Carter via an agent of the FBI. That conversation that was unrecorded was a private conversation between Elvis Presley and the president, and supposedly revolved around a friend and some special issues that were there that the friend needed help with. All of that is in the midst of, well, what could that be? And the cloak and dagger conspiracy then will continue to just evolve. But after this conversation on August 16, 1977, President Carter issued this tribute. Elvis Presley's death deprives our country of a part of itself. He was unique. He was irreplaceable. More than 20 years ago, he burst upon the scene with an impact that was unprecedented and will probably never be equaled. His music and his personality, fusing the styles of country and black rhythm and blues, permanently changed the face of American pop culture. His following was immense, and he was a symbol to people all over the world. The vitality, the rebelliousness, and good humor to this country. Many journalists noted at the time when this tribute came out that it's not unusual for local leaders to comment on a celebrity's death, but for the President of the United States to comment so quickly was unusual. The most obvious question then comes out of all of those pieces of the puzzle. The meeting with President Carter 2 weeks before his death, that conversation, the death of August 16th. If Elvis was an agent at large for the DEA, and if he was needing cover, is it possible that he had become the target of some folks who wanted him gone, and he needed the protection that was offered to and available to agents who had been threatened? Hard to know, but yet that is the conversations that have taken place through the years. The other thing that also becomes a little bit more mysterious is that Elvis Presley, although he was one of the most watched people in the world, he managed to get to Washington for a meeting with Richard Nixon. He managed on the day that he died to sneak down the back stairway at Graceland and accept a package that was delivered. And we're going to cover that more extensively in a future episode. And all of this was supposed to have happened while he was upstairs and perhaps dead. Yet it didn't. And so, was he or wasn't he? Is it possible, as some of the reports have stated, that Elvis Presley was an undercover agent with the DEA and his death was faked because he had to disappear? Whether or not it's true, I leave it up to you. What is interesting about that is that his disappearance did not end the story and the legend and the impact of Elvis Presley. And so, we're going to continue to look at the Elvis conspiracy in our future episodes. And believe it or not, as I told you, we're going to make a spiritual point by the time we're done. You just stay with me, because by the time we're finished, there is still a mountain of evidence that is coming your way, because Elvis's death is anything but simple and gets incredibly complicated trying to understand it. And so, until next time, I'm Jeff Dixon. I'll join you on our next episode of the Elvis Conspiracy.